Welcome to another exciting episode of Humanity 8.0, a podcast where we talk about movements and initiatives that seek to move humanity to its next epochal iteration. This podcast is brought to you by Witlingo. When it comes to managing a community, one of the keys to success is the ability to effectively communicate with the members of that community. If you are a service coordinator or responsible for community engagement, Witlingo provides a multi-channel, multilingual notification and engagement platform to help you work more efficiently and effectively. For more information, please visit www.witlingo.com. That's www.witlingo.com. And now, here's your host, Dr. Ahmed Bouzid.
David Kennedy, welcome to Humanity 8.0.
Thanks, Ahmed. It's great to be here.
Wonderful. Thanks for taking the time. I appreciate it. As we were chatting before we started recording, this is part of a series within my podcast focusing on democracy. I think we are living in interesting times, if I may put it that way, when it comes to the state or the health of our democracy in the United States, and I think beyond this country. And so I want to talk to folks who are not just talking about democracy, but doing democracy or pushing for it. And obviously, someone like you who is running for office, I think has much to share in terms of your thoughts and your action and your observations on the challenges of running for office. So you are currently running for the 8th Congressional District in Virginia, right?
Correct.
Okay. And you are running as an independent, I'm assuming.
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, I guess the first question to you is, so why are you running given that the 8th District has an incumbent who's been well ensconced in his a good guy and so on, but he is the establishment. And so my question to you then is, why you're running for office?
Well, let me just introduce my background quickly. I've been in higher education advocacy for over 30 years with a particular focus on university research and research sponsored by the federal government. Health research, medical research, science, technology. About 5 years ago, I decided to go to seminary just to explore a new space and went part-time. I graduated. Oops.
That's okay. You can have friends.
Okay. So I graduated in last May of 23, knowing that I was going to be retiring from my position. Actually, I just retired back at the end of July. Okay. Thinking, okay, what am I going to do with this seminary degree? And, I wasn't really focused on going into the church per se. I wanted to go into a space of social justice. And, I decided to run for Congress. And I researched it and obviously learned a lot about this district, which is, like you indicated, 75% blue with a pretty ensconced Democrat who's looking to get his 6th term. And I just felt to be in that space, part of the reason I thought a different voice would be important in that space, because I just think the two political machines in this country are way too powerful, have way too much money, and the media is their lackeys, or the other way around. I don't know who's a lackey to who, but I just feel like that's not where most Americans are. I think most people, are really turned off by always having to choose left or right. I mean, we're complex beings, and I can say I'm a Democrat or I could say I'm a Republican. I bet you I could agree, we can agree, we can be from different political parties, but find lots to agree on. And that's just not the message we get from Washington. And I think it's it's not good. It's not good for democracy. It's not good for just our how we engage with people.
Yeah, yeah, wonderful. No, I think you. Well, I mean, the founding fathers, George Washington was very, very anti political parties, right?
George
He-
Washington was, but George Washington, I think, was a unique
Unique.
person because as soon as
Yeah,
George left, you really did start to see this formulation of parties. You had the basically the Federalists and the
yeah.
Anti-Federalists. So yes, our history, but I think George Washington is a good touchstone. I mean, he's I think we can learn a lot from him.
Yeah. So why did he oppose political parties? What was his fear?
I've read a little bit about this. I actually dove into a really good book this summer called Miracle in Philadelphia. I think the author's last name is Drinker, and she pulls all together a lot of notes from James Madison and others who were at that convention that really was to write the Constitution. And I would say, I I I just think George Washington was probably a unique character. I mean, we know that he didn't really want to necessarily be president nor serve a second term, but I think he just was a person of the ultimate example of public service
Yeah.
and what is best. And, again, maybe it was just a moment in time where maybe that's just not how we're wired at the end of the day. Maybe it is about getting our way. Now, I think what's really great about the Constitutional Convention, there were a lot of dissenting voices, but when it went to the states for ratification,
Hmm.
even those dissenting voices, once it was ratified, they were all in.
Yeah.
And that's not how we work today.
Yeah.
If your side loses, you are immediately plotting the next steps so that your side can win and regain power.
Interesting.
And I don't think that was, I don't think that was, I think that patriots and patriotism, one of the things, a lesson to be learned from that is, well, when you lose and you don't get your way, you're still part of this country and you're still going to support advancing the country. You're not going to look to tear the other side down.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a great observation. But what are the couple of things that he was afraid of when it came to political parties, George Washington?
I'm not going to say I'm a George Washington scholar, so I can't. I mean, my expertise comes from my studies this summer on the Constitutional Convention,
Okay.
and I really don't feel like
Like,
I would be speculating. I don't want to get
well,
into the
let me
mind of George
speculate. Let
Washington.
let us
Yeah,
together speculate because we're definitely not scholars. You're probably a lot more of a scholar than I am about American history, political history. Um, but I think from my understanding is that I think he saw that a natural dynamic would emerge that would not be to the benefit of all. That when you create a machine like a political party, perhaps it has its own
yeah,
interests that are not aligned.
yeah,
Things like that is what I'm thinking, and I may be
yeah.
completely wrong. I'm just speculating. Yeah.
No, I think it's a good. I can't imagine that he had a foresight
Mm, mm,
of where we are today. That
no, I
there
don't.
would be two parties that
Yeah.
would be just pounding at one another. His perspective was a monarchy,
Mm,
right? That
mm, mm.
from from England, and that um, that was not a system that was going to be brought to to this new founding country.
Yeah.
I think he's not, we got to give him credit. It's not like he saw disagreement.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's not like he would have said, there's not going to be competition of ideas. I mean, he would have absolutely saw that. And I think people aligning around ideas would be something that he would also support. But I don't think he, again, would have ever anticipated money and media and tearing the other side down to the, I mean, healthy political debate. He was all in for. I mean, he was
Yeah.
overseeing that at the
Yeah.
Constitutional Convention, but I just, maybe it just wasn't on the radar of, I mean, this was, democracy was new. I mean, this
Yeah.
wasn't any, this was an experiment.
Yeah.
And so for him to anticipate,
Yeah.
just seems like, yeah, that it could, maybe it just wasn't,
Yeah.
it could
Yeah.
on his radar.
I think maybe maybe he was afraid of factions just ensconcing, like you're saying, right? I belong to this
Yeah.
team, belong to that team. I need to win. If I don't win, I'm gonna try again later on, as opposed to more of, like you're
Yeah.
saying, a flow of ideas, and they're just refining ideas and getting to something that is good, because maybe you see a side of the issue that I don't see, and so you inform me, and vice versa.
Hmm.
Then I think that, like you were saying, I think he definitely believed in in healthy debate and so on, and ideas of exchange. I think what he was afraid of, it feels to me, is hardening, artificial hardening, that
Yeah.
comes from
Yeah.
belonging to one camp versus the other. I think at that very basic level, perhaps he had that insight, and I don't think he was the only one who sort of was afraid of these factions solidifying and naturally, because I think the French Revolution came after, but the English Revolution, all the bloodbath that came from belonging to, and all Catholics versus Protestants, all those kinds of
Hmm.
factions, I think were in the air, and people were afraid of that kind of extremism. It just feels to me like he had that instinct, perhaps we'll call it an instinct or a feel for, we have something precious here, which is
Yeah.
pluralities talking to each other. What do you think?
Well, and I think though, again, just the checks and balances that were written into the Constitution. I
Yeah,
mean, that would also be provide probably a lot of assurance that even though we might have these factions and these
yeah,
competing ideas, we still now have this system of government that really does allow for ideas to for the people, we the people, for the
yeah,
people, that it's the people who are going to decide.
yeah, yeah. I mean, in a sense, is um Eisenhower feels to me like he's also one of those people who saw something coming and warned us, about the military industrial complex, right? So
Yes.
he's sort of like
Yes.
a second George Washington in a sense, because he gave us a warning about something that was. I don't think he also saw the extent to which, would be, we would be under that military industrial complex the way we are today. I mean,
Yeah.
today we really are under such a and it has its own rationale and so on and so forth, and we're sort of trapped. But yeah, it just felt to me that I always felt that Eisenhower was sort of a small version of George Washington, in that he gave
Huh.
us a warning early on.
Yeah. And an interesting parallel to generals, right?
True. People who are in the military are the ones who are the most against war, because they understand just
Yeah.
how crazy it is,
Right.
or irrational, or just damaging, and so forth. So let me take a step back and ask you, where did you grow up yourself? A little
Where
bit
did
of,
I grow up?
yeah.
I grew up in northern New Jersey, suburb outside of New York City,
What is it called?
eh, Ridgewood, New Jersey,
Oh, okay.
Bergen County. Um, and then I grew up in the 70s, and went to college, Lehigh University in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania,
Mm,
in the 1981. I taught school for 2 years in New York City after I graduated, and then I moved to Chicago to go to grad school. Had my family out there and raised my family, and moved into this area in 2006.
okay. So how would you compare those three places where you lived, or four places? New Jersey, Pennsylvania,
Yeah.
Chicago area, and then here.
I have really fond thoughts of all. You know, New Jersey was definitely more of a, you know, kind of a well-to-do suburb, very white, in some ways, very, I don't feel like, you know, I don't think I grew up seeing diversity, which I think it was too bad. I mean, but that's, you know, that's what I grew up in. But I think I felt very committed to moving into that new spaces, especially after I got out of college. Bethlehem, Pennsylvania is where Lehigh is, and I really was. That's why I got drawn to economics, and I think part of what drew me to economics was the big Bethlehem steel plant that sat on the Lehigh River
Mm-hmm.
that I ran by probably 3 or 4 times a week when I would go running, and it just made me think, wow, this is a symbol of another time. Now this plant was still open,
Yeah.
but it was also in its final years as you know steel little by little moved out of this country. So I got interested in economics and policy, and also I actually volunteered at the Boys Club of America, which was on the south side of Bethlehem. And I think it was my real, you know, getting to meet people from just a totally different background, a lot of Latino families and, you know, lower income. It really motivated me towards education. Again, economics was part of that too. Um, and, you know, I did have I call it an internship, 2-year internships teaching in New York City. But all that experience just said, you know what, I'm going to go out to Chicago and study public policy. And I was again in Chicago for, you know, close to 20 years, about 20 years, and had an opportunity to come to, I love Chicago. I'm a big, still a Chicago sports fan. My son is the consummate Chicago sports fan.
You grew up
Um,
there?
he grew up there and he'll never leave. I guarantee it. Um,
Great city and a
I
great
love
sports,
it.
also a great,
Yeah.
great sports city. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I lived there during the Michael Jordan years. So,
Ah,
and that's what my son was becoming a sports fan. So you can imagine, you know, as a kid, just having this iconic team and player.
was it
Anyway,
the era of the Bears? The Bears.
no, it just passed the Bears.
It was past the Bears.
Bears won the Super Bowl in '85, and I moved
85,
there
right?
the
Yeah.
following year. Yeah.
I see. Okay. Yeah.
Um,
Interesting. Okay. Um, so and so how do you compare? Because I lived in Philly. That's where I met
uh-huh.
my wife, and my son was born there. I loved Philly. I loved the whole field of Pennsylvania, to be honest with you.
Hmm.
And I also lived and I went to Virginia Tech, so that's
Hmm.
for grad school. Um, and I went to high school in DC. I mean in Bethesda, right?
Hmm.
And then so there's definitely a feel for the DC area. How would you describe it, having been to other places?
I think DC is the risk of DC is the bubble
The bubble.
the bubble being that it's all about the seat of power. It's about uh,
Yeah.
politics and again, you know, choosing sides and that's I think though I don't think that's the real DC, Arlington, DMV. I think you know what, there's just so much community. There's
Yeah.
you know, there's church community, there's neighborhood fairs, there's civic associations, there's ethnic restaurants, there's real life, you know, stuff going on that people struggle with. And it's, you know, the bubble is not, again, I think a lot of people think DC, if you're in the DC area, you are part of that bubble. But I just feel like it's such a rich area. There's a
Mhm.
lot of diversity. I've loved, you know, these past, you know, I officially started, though I was thinking, you know, planning my campaign last fall. there's a lot to learn as far as just signatures, how that all works. And there's campaign finance laws. So there's a lot of studying to do before you really dive into this. But the official date that I dove into it was the day I started collecting signatures, was January 2nd. And I just think between knocking on people's doors, camping myself out at my Starbucks, at my fitness club, going into businesses and introducing myself, and then ultimately, just meeting people where they are and having conversations, you just learn that this area is rich with just people. And I think we go into any community, I think it's rich with people. But I think the richness is in its diversity. And again, to your point, just being regular old folks, not part of the bubble, but just people living their lives, raising families, and being part of community.
Okay. So I want to touch on two things. One is the process, because you had to go through a crash course of how to go and get on the ballots, right?
Right.
So I think the audience would appreciate learning that. And also number two is the issues. Where do you stand on the issues? I want to give you a chance to articulate your stand on the core issues. And then after that, I want to do something fun, I think, which is to do a thought experiment with you and
Okay.
help. Hopefully, you can help me sort of go through it, right?
Yep.
Okay. So tell us. So early January of this year, you started collecting signatures. So you can't collect before, and then you have to collect signatures. How many do you need to collect, and by when? And then you can tell us the challenges you faced doing that.
You have a few ways to enter into a race for Congress. If you affiliate with a party, you actually have to, number one, pay a fee.
How much?
And I think it was around $3,700.
Wow.
And I think that all I could guess is that entitles you to access to that party and some of their resources. So as an independent, you don't need to pay that fee, which means you are truly on your own. It's funny. I actually knocked on the door of, this was probably in February, of a woman here, just like 3 blocks from me, and just same old, introducing myself, asking for a signature. And she actually, and you can look, I don't have her name right in front of me, but she actually ran in the Democratic primary for Don Byer's seat in 2022.
Wow.
Yeah, that would be an interesting interview to do. And it's easy enough to find. I could, if just look at who ran in the Democratic.
I will. That's okay. That's intriguing.
Yes.
Okay.
And I didn't talk to her for a long time, but she did share with me that she had run in 2022 so the reason I bring her up is based on that very short conversation, even though she must have paid her fee to run in the Democratic Party and had to still do all the signatures, and that's another thing, you have to do the signatures by March.
By March, okay.
In order to, I think it's towards the end of March, to run in the June primary.
3 months, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
But she did not strike me as thrilled with the support she got from the Democratic Party, which to me would be a real shame, because if we're looking for competition of ideas and you qualify to run as a Democrat against the incumbent, the party bosses, I don't think should be choosing sides. But I'm not convinced that was her experience. I don't want to put words in her mouth, but I think it'd be an interesting.
Well, I think that's not surprising at all. I think I would be surprised if it was the other way around, to be honest with you. If the party bosses did not get involved and tip the scale in favor of the establishment. I'm gonna reach out to her and get her on. But as an independent, how many does it matter how many signatures you need to collect? You need to collect both
Yes.
either way, right?
It's the same either way. And as an independent, I didn't have to worry about a primary. So I had technically till June something to get signatures. I got all my signatures by early April. I ended up submitting 1,200 and I needed 1,000 because they verify everyone as a registered voter.
Yeah.
And I didn't, I had enough of a cushion. So 1,200, I think my success ratio, I think about 89% of the people that signed were registered voters. So I qualified with that batch of, 1,200 plus a few.
So it's like 20% plus, so 1,000 plus. Okay. So is the rule of thumb like 20% more?
They
Perhaps.
always say
Depends,
they said at least 1,200, maybe even 1,500.
just to make
It's not
sure.
easy I mean, signatures, especially if you're doing it on your own, I put in a lot of
Yeah.
sweat equity, let's call it that, just because, I didn't have canvassers. I mean, I got every single signature. So it was a lot of time, literally January through early April. That was my sole focus.
Okay. And then, so you went door to door. Tell us, like, put us in your shoes.
It's I think the first signature was easy because it was my wife. And the next few after that were pretty easy because it was my next door neighbors. But little by little, you run out of those people who know you. So I think it's you number one, be okay with rejection. And rejection was never like slamming a door on your face, but rejection still comes, it can be someone nice, it could be someone not as kind, no, I can't sign, or I support the incumbent or whatever.
Sure.
So, and it's also I mean, I've learned how to talk about why I'm doing this. And I've refined my issue, how I understand issues, because people ask me questions, so I have to,
Yep.
be able to talk to issues. So I think it's a really good process to be eligible to be a candidate. Because if anybody, it forced me to think. It forced me to say, I'm serious about this. So I think I was really, I didn't always want to do it. I mean, there were days that I said, shoot, I don't feel like it. But I always had a goal in mind, knowing, I needed to get to this by the end of January. I want to be at this by the end of February. So I really just needed to stay on task.
Makes sense. Yeah. And so once refined, once you pinned it down, what was your pitch? You knock, somebody opens the door. What do you say?
I'm Dave Kennedy. I am running for U.S. Congress, and I'm running as an independent. And my my focus is just bread and butter issues, quality of life issues, like safe streets, affordable housing, dignity of a job. Now, signature wise, I would then have to say, this is what I need. Now it's a lot easier now because when I introduce myself to people, I can introduce myself the same way. But if they're sense of not interested, I can just say, hey, and I'm not really asking for anything. I'm just introducing myself. So it's become easier to
You don't have an ask. Okay.
I don't have an ask anymore. Well, I guess I could ask to vote for me, but all I'm saying is
Sure.
my ask is always,
Listen,
hey,
to me.
just remember me, and Dave Kennedy 2024.com, and look me up and remember me on November 5th.
Yeah. So Don Bayer is running against I think Vietnamese American, forgetting his last name.
No. That's the Senate seat. That's Tim Kaine.
Oh, Tim Kaine. I'm sorry. I apologize. That's
But
definitely. Well, who is he? He's running against somebody who was supported by Trump or is being endorsed by Trump. Is
the Republican is a guy named Jerry Torres.
Yes. Okay.
And it's very everything I've heard, I think he lives in Florida. Someone I was talking to the other day said he actually ran for Congress in Florida. I'm sure he has roots here. He's got to have a house here.
Sure.
And think what I understand has happened is that he was recruited by the Republican Party just as a favor to have someone on the ballot.
I see. Okay.
He doesn't.
Okay.
His website is continually been under construction. So
Okay, so he's not really a challenger. I'm just thinking, like, probably right now the ethos out there in terms of Democrats voting is, I'm gonna vote Democratic because if I don't, there's a threat. It's sort of fear driven right now, right? The threat of a Republican is gonna take the seat. And so, did you find that as when people were saying? I guess my question is, when people were saying, no, I'm sorry, I'm not gonna sign. What were the top two reasons that they gave you?
well, I think there were, and that this was an interesting. This was definitely the minority, but I think it was one of the top reasons was I support Don Beyer. And they were that was again a minority, a very small slice, but there were, probably over the court, I could say probably 100 people, and this is talking to thousands and thousands, maybe even 50 said that they just, and they were always just adamant, I support Don Beyer. The other I think you hit on the other one was, I don't want someone out there who's going to take votes away from the incumbent, because to your point, maybe then a Republican would sneak in. Now, I don't think that's true in this district. I mean, I think, it's 70. I mean, again, if you look at the history, it's 75% blue for this seat.
Yeah. I think the 10th district is probably a little bit less.
It's 10. I'm trying to think where 10. It's 10.
10 is I think 10 is like
Is that right next to you? Is that Jerry Connolly?
like yeah, I think so. I think like Herndon, like all that
I think it's Jerry Connolly, but I think he's pretty. I think he's relatively.
Or it used to be a reddish, I think, about
Could
like
be, yeah.
10 years ago. And then Comstock, remember Comstock? I think she.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's you're right. That's a different district. That one is much more competitive. That's the one that Jennifer Wexton
Yes, that's exactly right.
has had to retire because I think she has Parkinson's.
Oh no. Okay.
Yeah. You're right.
What is that?
Connolly is 11, I believe.
11.
So you're probably right, 10.
So that one, I think the independent will probably have more of this issue that I was mentioning of.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right.
So 1200, you got 1200. It took you until April, so January, February, March, 4 months. You had till June. June is the deadline for finalizing the ballots, right? For the general.
Yeah.
Basically you went, just tell me, like, you went door to door, plus maybe you went to events perhaps where you had groups of people and so forth.
Went to at that point, I didn't go to his events as often. Now I'm going to more events because I'm just introducing myself. I think at the end of the day, I learned door to door is the best, because
really? Okay.
Because you know what, they are at their address and they're going to tell you right away if they're a registered voter or not. Whereas if you're in a more public area, they could be,
could be somewhere else.
They could be from DC. I've been to, I've come across groups of people and introduced myself, and 2 or 3 of them are from DC. So that's.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Okay. Now, so sort of that's a taste for the mechanics of it. So in terms of the issues, I was looking at your stand on the issues, and I was hard pressed to see the difference between. It feels like you are, I would say, if I want to put it, in labels, like democratic, like liberal, progressive, on that spectrum, right? And if I may ask you, did you vote Democratic before, more than?
I've probably leaned, yes, I've leaned Democrat, though I have voted for a few Republicans. Once upon a time, this is when I lived in Illinois, we had a Governor Jim Edgar. And I just remember, following him, and he was a very moderate Republican. And, what I said, so I feel like I've actually,
Yeah.
I still feel like I would label myself more as like a centrist. Um, I do have a lot of I have a lot of relationships and people in my life who, who just um I've seen the struggle, and I've seen some of the discrimination, to be honest. And so I do think I'm gonna always lean towards, one of the things that I've been very intentional about my platform is it's love neighbor, respect differences, and challenge bullies. And I do think there's something about, to me, love neighbor and compassion is not a liberal versus conservative uh, divider. I think, and that part of it is I have a lot, people in my family and friends who I would say are very, very conservative. But I also see, I too come to mind, they're two of the most kind people I know. And, they have, politically they're conservative, but when it comes to helping neighbor, they'd probably be the first two to do it.
Yeah, I believe it. I believe it for sure. Yeah. Um, Now the third one about stand up to bullies. Tell me more about that. Why did you pick that as one of your three?
Well, I think at the end, I do think there comes a point where you, loving neighbor, I think, is just how we need to be in the
Yep.
public sphere. And then once you're in that public sphere, when there's differences, I think you respect differences. I do think, though, if someone takes those differences and uses them, latches onto an issue that demonizes anyone,
Hmm.
that to me is just unacceptable. And I think whether it's policy or personal conduct towards another person, anything that marginalizes someone, demonizes someone, makes someone a scapegoat, that to me is a very clear line that you cross when you've done that, then it is time to challenge bullies.
Yeah, I like that. I like the fact that in addition to let's number one, leaning on what is instinctive in all of us, which is we are social creatures, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Can't help it, right? And then but at the same time, let's make sure that people don't take advantage of that. I think I like the sort of like, okay, there's a red line. Let's
Mm-hmm.
not let's not
Yeah.
let's not be accepting of everything, including people who are transgressing. I guess is the way I think I would process that third point. Okay.
You've been listening to Humanity 8.0 with your host, Dr. Ahmed Bouzid, founder and CEO of Witlingo.